Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Ecoffee with Experts. I'm your host, Matt Fraser. And today I have a very special guest with me, Jenna Hasenkampf. Now, Jenna is the Managing Director of MKG Marketing, Inc., a remote PPC, SEO, and analytics marketing agency. She has been working in marketing for over 15 years, has a very interesting story, and has experience with brands such as Nike, Gap, Mini Cooper, and the Kennedy Space Center. When she's not wearing her managing director hat, she enjoys spending time with her son, daughter, husband, and 2 dogs. Jenna, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Matt. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you here. So Jenna, I guess today we're going to talk about, you have some experience in this. So how to harness the power of data to turbocharge your marketing campaigns. I have some experience in this as well. So I'm very interested to talk to you about it. Well, what are some of the benefits of doing data-driven marketing from your experience?
Just to really simply put it, it validates your efforts. So I've done traditional out-of-home, TV, print, et cetera. And all of that tends to be measured on the people you might reach. And you do a lot of potential views of people driving by your billboards, et cetera, when you're doing campaign recaps with your clients. You can do the best you can to work with locations, channels, and content that fits your personas, but it's really about the size of the reach than a niche audience. So you can spend a lot of money reaching the wrong people or the right people at the wrong time. When you're using data, it lets you slice and dice your audience into not just who they are, but also where they are in that customer journey and customize your messaging and content to actually meet their needs.
Wow, that's amazing. How important do you think it is in today's digital marketplace?
I mean, I guess, why would you even advertise in digital and not use data? If your analytics aren't set up, then someone's not doing their job right at your company, basically, because there's just so much data available and so many ways to track it, including a ton of free tools out there. Using data to build out your personas and better understand what they need and how to provide that means you have more money to spend in developing your products, building your sales team, compensating your team.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting. You mentioned having analytics. I know of so many businesses that I've either worked for or, consulted with or looked at their websites and got into the analytics side of things. And their understanding of analytics is the installation of Google Analytics script on their website. And I'm like, that's just the beginning. Have you found that to be true with a lot of businesses? Like, there's no goals set up for the form completions or event tracking. And it's like, I even worked for a car dealership that was spending, a considerable amount of money, like over $1 million a year in ad spend. And there was the Google the Google Analytics was a joke. It was like, wow, there's nothing here to even determine what's working and not working because you haven't even analyzed your funnel in regards to what it is you're trying to accomplish. So, so how can businesses, what should they look for when looking at their data and wanting to get that information out of their campaigns? I mean, for instance, I'll frame this. Does it start with the funnel and knowing where the key conversion points are?
Yes, but you can also build that with data. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
So interesting. Tell me about that.
Well, so when we come into clients, we'll always do an analytics audit. And sometimes we're setting up their Google Analytics to begin with. Like, they already have a functioning site and Google Analytics isn't set up. It happens more often than you would think. And then and that's not even considering whether, Google Tag Manager or something's being deployed to actually track, like what you said, what people are actually doing on the site. So building the persona or building your funnel is really knowing the purpose of your pages and content. So you should have what we call referential pages, which is really that top of the funnel where you're establishing, I am a noteworthy source of this topic. I am an expert in here. I should be showing up. People should be finding what I say valuable and earning trust that way. So knowing what your goals are for those pages, you're going to want people to be spending time on them. You might be wanting to see people go to more than one page. You would expect there to be a high bounce rate because those people are really coming in to learn something. They're not coming in to engage yet. And you're not necessarily having a lot of conversion points on this page. It might be sign up for a newsletter. But setting the right conversion point. So you don't look at that and think it's a failure. Because if you look at a referential page and you're like, well, nobody's clicking the contact me or downloading the white paper or doing this, it's like that, because the intent to do those actions doesn't match the intent of the people coming to this page. Yeah. So I'm going to use intent a lot in this conversation.
Oh, that's fine.
But that's really, I think, starting with intent in your buyers or your demand gen funnel, and mapping out what those intent pieces look like, and then making sure do you have content on your website to match all these different stages, and then what would you consider the actions to be, and then you can use data to actually prove that or disprove it. So it's really, I think product management is very similar to this, where you're coming up with a lot of hypotheses and then you're using data to prove it or learn. So what I've always said to clients when we've differed on a direction is that we can always change it. Like, we're going to do what the data tells us. Like, it's not an ego game for us. It's not about making a big splash with creative or anything like that. Like, we really want to see that our strategy's working, which we will see because everything's plugged in and firing, and we're looking at data on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis and figuring out what's working, what's not, and when to pivot.
You may come up with a strategy, and it may be a good strategy according to best practices of marketing. And the data may tell you, have you ever had a time where the data said something different and you had to pivot?
I mean, I think everybody had that time in 2020. Yeah. Everybody went in 2020 with all of these marketing strategies and all of these plans. And then we had a global pandemic, and all of a sudden, no one was going to conferences. No one was going into physical stores and selling. So everybody had to pivot where their resources were going, which was, really crazy times, because nobody knew how long the pandemic was going to last, what the long-term impacts were going to be, what businesses would be viable or not viable based on what was happening, because it's unprecedented. Nobody had any data to fall back on.
We didn't, did we?
Yeah. So I think that everybody's business who survived that should give themselves a pat on the back, because that was the biggest pivot, hopefully, knock on wood, any of us will ever face with strategy.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That I think there's a lot of businesses that weren't strong, that the market and the pandemic kind of like cleaned house in regards to those things. Whether you were a plumber or you were a marketing agency, I know that the survival of the fittest is in the marketplace, and that's exactly what happened.
And for us, we went from everybody slashing budgets because everyone was panicked, nobody knew what was going on, to the second half of the year, everybody throwing more budgets because we were doing SEO, pay-per-click, and digital analytics. So we were where people could funnel in money to build their sales funnel in ways that were like, we got all the conference money got thrown into PPC and SEO, because conferences weren't real anymore. And most places were not ready to take their conferences fully digital. I think that's changed where now there's a lot more digital or hybrid conferences, which actually I think is very cool. But in 2020, those weren't really happening.
Yeah, I think digital conferences, hybrid, where you offer both to people who can attend in person, and recordings and production of people who want to attend virtually online. You're leaving a lot of money on the table if you don't. But I don't think people would have thought of that before the pandemic. That's for sure. So I want to talk about the data and the strategy. And it's kind of like, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? So can you share with me what kind of data you find most useful when planning the marketing campaigns?
Yeah, absolutely. It depends, because every client has a different amount of data. Some have none. So what we generally, again, we're like focusing this from the SEO and PPC side of it. Is anything that we can get into their website and start seeing, like, what are your valuable pages? What ones are getting most traffic? Where are actions coming in? But we want to always pair that also with leaning in on the client expertise, which is leaning in on the product expertise and the sales expertise if we can get it, because product can tell us what the key differentiators are and what they're selling, what their language is that they're using to describe that, what the nuanced bits of information that make their product different are. But then the sales is the kind of the proof, because every successful product is solving a problem for somebody. And the salespeople have that direct pipeline to, here are the questions that our potential buyers or existing buyers are asking. Here's their pain points. Here's what they're happy about, excited about. You can get a lot of really amazing intel. So if you combine that with data, that's really where you can start to have a keyword list. You can start to build your content strategy. You can start to research competitors and see how they're showing up and how they're talking to these problems. You can even just Google some of the problems and questions that customers are bringing to the sales team and see what's showing up and do research that way. And that's, I think, the best way that we start with, like, without, sometimes we'll actually get to inherit a bunch of existing paid ads or analytics reports that we can dig into and things are a little further along, but that's a great fresh place to start that isn't requiring too much from the client side that they're not already doing.
And that makes a lot of sense. Like, you can get so much data from your sales team because they're front facing. I mean, I don't want to make references to car dealers all the time. And I mean, I've done other things, but like any person who's a salesperson, has direct access to the client. They know what questions prospects are asking or potential customers are asking. And I imagine the same thing goes for customer service. I think that probably, and this is all data too. The customer service team probably, if the business is big enough to have a customer service team, it is probably a valuable resource as well to tap for data in order to find out answers to these questions of how to build the campaign. How important do you think, just out of curiosity, this question just came to my mind of, using that data and even CRM data to compile customer personas?
It's super important because there's been a shift in the last couple of years with the targeting that you can now do and what we've learned about targeting in the term is psychographic. So targeting used to be all around demographic, like where people were, how old they were, if they're married was usually considered in that too, what their gender was. And now there's been so much more detailed targeting done around psychographic, where it's like you can have two people that are the same age, live the same place, and one of them is your target and one of them isn't, based on just what they need and what their life is like, because people are very different. And using the psychographic side of things, you can really get into discover who they are. So I think pairing that data into your personas is really, really important. What do they do for a living? Where do they live? Where do they lean politically? Sometimes can actually talk about whether or not you're a product, what they tend to spend their time doing, which gives you targeting information that you wouldn't have. And some of that can come from your customer team, but also you can even use sites like Reddit or social and see if you don't have access to sales team information because it's either launching soon or they just haven't been recording it that way. If you learn enough about the product and the problem that they're trying to solve for their consumers, you can use that to search Reddit or any of those other topics and see what people are complaining about, asking, and doing. When I worked on Nike Women and we were doing their Facebook page back when Facebook's algorithm hadn't totally made everything have pay per play, when it was actually real organic growth. We got feedback all the time from some of our most passionate customers. And it was really great because we could see, are you excited about this? Do you like this? All right, you don't like that. We're going to go in this direction. And we could just keep pivoting. Wow. And I think that's an important thing with your personas is you don't want to overdo it with changing them, but they're not, they should never be just in stone things. They're going to be constantly developing because your product's going to be innovating and their needs are going to change. I mean, again, with the pandemic, everybody got digitally accelerated. What people needed 3 years ago versus what people need and expect now is super different. I mean, the fact that we're having this Zoom call right now. I've been using Zoom for 5 years at my agency because we're remote, but now it's everyone has used Zoom. What a crazy thing to happen to your product.
Absolutely. I know. I've been using Zoom for like that long. I was using it with Ring Central, and Ring Central was white labeling it, calling it Ring Central meetings. And now they've ended that relationship and created their own product. But anyway, this whole thing with Zoom and and talk about Google missing the boat with with meetings, and it's just Zoom came in and just they disrupted the market. Are there, besides Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager, are there any other tools that you use or recommend for data collection in regards to digital marketing and online, websites and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm I'm not in the analytics as the manager, but I do work in a lot of the reporting and analysis side of the team. So my answer is a little like higher level, but
that's fine.
I think it's great to find tools that you're comfortable with the interface. Like, I think that's a big one. Like I love, everybody loves Slack because of the way that Slack's interface is. We use Zoom chat. It's fine. It's got some pluses, but we all miss Slack because like that was the interface we like. So I think, and the reason I say that is because data can be intimidating. So finding a program that makes you feel comfortable in there is like really helpful when you're already kind of jumping into the deep end of learning data if it's not something you're super familiar with. For us, we use SEMrush right now for SEO. We've used a few different tools. We also use tools based on what's already installed on clients, but the one that we're liking the most for just the accuracy of data, the flexibility with it, and the responsiveness of the team is SEMrush. Using a data aggregator, if you are a larger, more sophisticated client where you have like Salesforce data or stuff like that, you're going to need something to be able to bring your data sources in and look at it together. So we use NinjaCat. NinjaCat. And then I know we have clients that use Adobe. So, I mean, there's a lot of different options there. So there's so many different data options that it's easy to be overwhelmed. But I think there's a lot of companies out there doing a really good job of trying to simplify things and make them more user-friendly. Like I know I have a former coworker who was obsessed with HubSpot and how easy they make things to work. But the cool thing that I'm not sure everybody knows too is that most of these sites have a free version. So if you're a smaller company just figuring it out, or if you're one employee trying to like wrap your head around this or make a use case to sell it in, you can usually set up some sort of free account. And they also, most of them have invested in a lot of free training available on their sites because they want you to know how to use the tools successfully. So there's a lot that you can do to figure out what tools right for you. And you can kind of go at your own pace before you have to necessarily talk to a sales rep.
And I guess there's also, Google Data Studio, if people wanted to go that route.
We do a lot of dashboards with that. It's very cool.
Because then you can you can bring the data into one source from different, like for instance, I don't know why. Sorry for our listeners, and I'm sorry about my throat. I don't know what's going on.
Pollen is terrible.
It's just, my barbecue was covered with pollen the other day. To be able to pull the data in from the SEO and from the PPC into one, and from the Facebook ads, because it's not organic anymore, to be able to, I guess that's what I was talking about, to be able to actually see that data and know, hey, these are the KPIs and this is the actionable data that we can make decisions on, that we can execute business decisions of more ad spend here and less ad spend there. And this is working and this is not working. And this is, look, they're coming in on as you mentioned earlier, they're coming in on an SEO informational article. And then I guess you could also use that for retargeting. That's one advantage of data-driven marketing, isn't it? Retargeting.
Absolutely.
I don't know if do you want to touch on that a little bit? I just thought of that just now.
It's not really my forte, so I don't think I'd have anything useful to say, but it's definitely something that our PPC experts use. And it's because a lot of people need more than one touch in digital. And that's another piece of the data is if you get really sophisticated, like one of our clients, Extra Hop, that we've been working with for like 7 years now. So we've had a lot of time to like work together to build out their data. They are able to track multi-touch. So we can actually see how many touches. So what I mean by touches is how many times someone has been served something or engaged with you digitally. before they become an actual like sales prospect. And it's always multiple. Like if you're dealing with a B2B product or a higher end, even consumer product, like a car, people aren't just doing one touch and going in, or very rarely. Like, so it's really great to be able to see what worked, like what content did they engage with? What did they download? Did they see PPC ads as well? And knowing just that bigger picture of what it takes to get them into that final decision. And then it also helps because if your data is only tracking that final step, it gives you a very skewed picture of what in your marketing is working. And I think that's a lot of mistake that people make with SEO is because it tends to be more on the top of funnel side of things, is seeing it as not a revenue driver when it's actually a really important piece to that building your demand gen side of things.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And for retargeting, like we were doing, when I say it was just me, but when I was working at the car dealership, I was a one-man show wearing all the hats. But anyway, we retargeted people who were on a vehicle detail page, like a single product page, single vehicle page. And if they didn't convert by hitting a thank you page for the test drive offer, and we had to segment. When I got there, they didn't have dedicated thank you pages for each type of car, like new or used. They weren't segmenting that. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that if we didn't have that data, we wouldn't have been successful, because what we did was people who didn't convert on the vehicle page, we retargeted with dynamic ads. So if they were on used cars, we showed them similar vehicles of used cars on Facebook by dynamically retargeting with dynamic ads. And then also retargeting them with display ads for the offer of the month or campaign of the month or whatever it was. So I just wanted to point that out. Like you mentioned we talked about retargeting a little bit. The customer journey and being able to find out, okay, where are they at in the customer journey? They've gone this far. How do I use data to get to the next step? That's
you always have the opportunity to learn. If someone falls off, or usually we're focused on more than one person, but if a group of people fall off, understanding where they fell off and why that might have happened. Yeah.
So I was very successful with that, but can you share any examples of data-driven campaigns that you found to be successful, like in general terms, that you don't have to divulge client names and secrets, just
I always try to stay general when it's B2B, especially. But last year we were brought in to manage a portion of paid digital for a SaaS company that was transitioning from startup to rapid growth. So they were getting a ton of funding then. And then during this, our brief and our client contact changed, because the rapid growth that happens, things are always like, written in pencil, not in pen when that's happening. So first we were focused on optimizing against lead quality. So like, are the leads paying off into the sales funnel? Like, are these like really trying to go from that, figuring out what your strong quality lead is, and then trying to scale it versus the opposite. But then the opposite was requested because they really needed the quantity over the quality because of how quickly they were growing. They didn't really have the time to say, all right, let's really nail down what our specific lead type is and then scale it up. They were like, no, we need to get as many people into this pipe as possible, which is valid also. It can go either way depending on like your client needs. They had to turn on, the fire hose instead of the tap. So when you're in digital, it's easy to pivot. And we did. So we started optimizing as the number of people converting. It could sound like the wrong strategy because it's quality over quantity. But again, like I said, if it's a growing company, you might need that quantity to really, be driving enough product sales to keep funding the level that you need, but also to get data really quickly. Like you turn on the fire hose, you all of a sudden are getting thousands of people that are going through the funnel or dropping out, and that you're seeing what their engagement with different ad copy is, different landing pages. So it's a ton of data in a short amount of time. It just costs more, but there can be a payoff with that.
Absolutely.
It helps you build your personas much, much quicker. So we were doing that. We were making tweaks. We learned that there was a certain word that if we had at the beginning of our ads and increased performance, and we had enough data to draw conclusions from that because we were talking to so many people. We dialed up spend and search and display because, just search can be a little iffy depending on the keywords, but display is usually a really cheap option to get out in front of a lot of people.
And
so
get data that way.
Yeah. So it's easier to scale.
Oh.
And
wow. There's a tip you just shared right there. That's a golden nugget. So
again, it depends on your goals.
So display advertising to gather data is a less expensive way to get data about your lead type or your customer. Is that correct? Like if you're working
with Google Display, so you're not buying it through a third party site. If you're working with lo-fi ads, which you absolutely can do with display. And you're really focusing more on the making sure the copy and the targeting is going. It's really just another vehicle of Google search. It's a great way to just get a ton of exposure for cheap, but it does also tend to be less of quality leads. So again, there's a trade-off. And then we were still working in Facebook and LinkedIn because it's SaaS. So those are both great options. But with Facebook, we realized we had to expand the audiences to accommodate the fact that Facebook, a lot of people don't list their job titles there because that's not the purpose of that social network. There's a ton of psychographic information there if you know that about your potential client. Whereas LinkedIn, as we all know, you can target by the place that they work, the size of it, the industry, their title, all that good stuff. So
here's go ahead.
Go ahead.
How do you use data to determine which marketing channel to use for campaigns? You just mentioned, for instance, Facebook not having job titles for B2B businesses. Are there other key factors that you've experienced where the data has told you this channel is best for this type of campaign? Like, for instance, you mentioned this SaaS company that you had to pivot. Maybe a brand awareness campaign on Facebook would be better for that type of campaign, and a LinkedIn would be better for conversion for that type of customer. SEO is good for informational, bringing them at the top of the funnel. Things like that is what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. It really depends on your goals and your customer profile. But I mean, Google paid ads should be used throughout the funnel because most of the time, if you think about it, when you're trying to look for a specific product and you don't have the answer in mind, you might be ready to buy. You would still use Google to search it, or you would be figuring out what your solutions are for a specific problem. You'd still use Google to search it. So Google's always a key player in that. I think it always comes down to budget too, because depending on what your keywords are, even time of year, Q4 is always insane how much things cost because everybody's trying to burn their end of year budget, and you're dealing with the fact that it is the holidays. So end of goes through the roof. Year. Yeah, we hate starting new clients at the end of Q4 with paid because we're your results are going to be super skewed. Everything's going to be super expensive, but you also don't want to have the lights off. So that's a little bit rambly, but LinkedIn is interesting because when I started working here 5 years ago, LinkedIn was a big waste of money. We would experiment with it, usually by client request, and it was always a waste of money. It was expensive, not a lot of action, conversions. And I think it was when it was really functioning more in that HR capacity. And now I feel like that has shifted significantly. It's still super expensive, but you can the targeting is so much better, and people seem to be interested in actually seeing LinkedIn ads. And one of the ways that we've used LinkedIn quite a bit is through events. If you're having digital events or webinars, or even if you want to just post a WebEx, getting opt-ins that way. They have really great targeting there, and people are there to go to that kind of stuff. Their platform is built to support it. We do LinkedIn streaming events through our agency where we do roundtables. But that's a great fit for LinkedIn if you have the budget. And then just general targeting too. If you have a really specific job title that you know is your decision maker, that can be a great space. But Facebook is also, because Facebook, I mean, I joined Facebook when it was one of the 6 first colleges. So Facebook has been creepily gathering information on me since I was 20. So the amount of data that people have given for free to Facebook and what they're interested in, what they like doing, where they go, like who they're connected to, what pages and businesses they want to engage with. I mean, it's a ton of information. It's as scary as people think it is. Like it absolutely is. So it's a great place to reach people if you know more about your target consumer beyond a job title. Like if you're really got a good idea of what their lifestyle needs are, especially if you're not like B2B, we definitely use it a ton and get a lot of good results, but it's also easier in the consumer good side of it because you know what they need and what they're interested in. And it's not so business tied, but
yeah,
Facebook, it's just, everybody's got a Facebook and the demographic that has shifted too. I mean, now I think about deleting my Facebook weekly, whereas my parents are super active on Facebook. And I think that, so now like the people that you can reach on Facebook, yeah, everybody still has their Facebook, but the people that are active are often a really great target for businesses.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, what about using existing customer data on Facebook? Any thoughts on that?
That one I can't really speak to because I'm not in the behind the scenes data anymore on the Facebook side of things. And it's always changing.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I was alluding to, and my apologies, I didn't mean to catch you off guard there, was like I used customer data, existing customer data to create lookalike audiences.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were able to just blow it up. So for instance, those people that were landing on that, the people that were booking a test drive on Facebook, we used them to create data. We use the data from there to create a lookalike audience to target the exact same people or people who are interested in a car. Mm-hmm. We used that data to create a lookalike audience to advertise to. And even if you don't have the data, I think that taking your CRM data and uploading that to Facebook and saying, hey, okay, here's our customers. Know your CRM data of who your customers are. And then using that as a lookalike audience to target to get more clients. That's just, if people aren't doing that, they're leaving so much money on the table if businesses aren't doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can come from so many sources too. It can come from your email list. It can come from your sales list. It can come from downloads, anything that's gated on your site. I mean, there's so many places you can pull those lists together. I think where we struggle sometimes is that depending on the platform, there's different thresholds for those lists. So if you're just starting out, you may not have a big enough list, but you should be working on building one.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the minimum is 1,000, a list of 1,000 people for Facebook. Last I checked, I could be wrong because it changes sometimes by the minute, you think, but we all know it changes all the time.
I mean, we're in SEO. Google is constantly, people are like, oh, there's a big algorithm. It's like they do algorithm updates like practically daily. They're just most of the time not noticed by the general public.
No, I think they probably do hundreds of, they announced the big ones like this last one in May. But I think other than that, they're always they're releasing in between the big ones, they're releasing ones all the time.
Yep.
So, it really is. It's a data-driven world, isn't it? In regards to marketing, like gone are the days of putting a $5,000 newspaper ad in the paper and praying that it works or like the traditional. I just don't know how traditional media can survive when there are so many opportunities. Like I would exhaust all my marketing budget on online and perfecting my data and honing in on my data before I even thought about traditional means. I mean, is that crazy or agree or disagree?
I think it depends. I think if you have a small budget, definitely digital should be exactly what you're focusing on. But I think that one of the trade-offs that you make with digital is that you're in a very crowded space. Whereas if you have a TV commercial and someone is staying on that channel, all they're getting is your message right then. Yes, there'll be commercials afterwards, but think about how often you're on a website and you're getting like 5 different companies talking to you at the same time, or search results, like all the other results showing up. It's very noisy. And I think that you get the payoff is the fact that you can actually match intent much better, but it's very noisy. Whereas if you have a great out-of-home placement and it makes sense for your brand and the awareness, it can be that's it. And again, if you're in a city, that's not true. Then they're all over the place, and I don't really know why you do that. But if you use traditional in really like the right placements, you can get a lot of just focus that you don't get in digital.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Thanks for sharing that. That's that makes, because you're one click away. Your competitor is literally one click away. I guess if I were to, though, the one traditional, if I exhausted the budget, the one traditional, and data would come into this as well, that I would try first would be direct mail. I mean, direct mail directly to my existing customer base of offers, or even a monthly newsletter, something like that. As people may think that's crazy, but there's no more. And then that's totally off topic. Sorry, but it's
I think it's interesting because I don't know the details of it because I've just been working and so focused in digital, but I had read that direct mail actually made a huge resurgence during COVID because everybody was at home and they actually were looking at their mail versus it going in the office inbox. Where I remember walking by one of our agency owners at one of my past agencies inbox, and he had 2 of them and they were just stuffed with stuff, getting it to him. But I think COVID, people actually liked getting mail, even when it was not, something they requested. And I don't know if that's still going on, but I mean, look at the boom that Sendoso had during the last few years. And I know they just did some layoffs, but I think that their company has just exploded. And there's a few other ones in that same space that I think it just sending actual physical things, people are responding to that again. I mean, who knows how long now that there's hybrid and going back to the office and things, but it definitely, people had more attention to give for that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's incredible. What I don't want to chase the rabbits, but what you talked about made me think of combining digital and offline together, using that data to, and I know it's a totally different subject, and I know we're coming to an end here. So maybe we could have you on again and talk about it if you want to, but just made me think. I went to a marketing conference. No, it wasn't a conference. Sorry. It was a seminar put on by the one of the professors from McGill University, out in Quebec, in Montreal. And he was here in my city, and he was talking about this platform that Xerox had bought, and it was put on by the postal company here, Canada Post. And they were talking about how combining digital data to execute offline and online marketing strategies together, omni-channel marketing, if you will. And it was an omni-channel marketing platform. And it was just fascinating.
Yes, so, I mean, it's the same idea of multi-touch. It doesn't all have to be digital if you have a way to bring it back. And there's different ways that you can pull tracking into it. You can't always, but I think that it's really just recognizing that you're going to have to most likely reach your customer in more than once and in more than one way to be successful. Absolutely. And data is going to help you do it. Yeah. Hey, what is one big takeaway you want listeners to get from this episode? Don't be intimidated by the largeness of data-driven marketing. There's so much out there and so many sophisticated systems, it can feel overwhelming. But if you approach it with questions and hypothesis and consider it an exercise in information gathering, you'll move in the right direction. And there's so many great guides on different tools and best practices out there, as well as digital communities are happy to answer questions or check things out. Data nerds are friendly. We love to talk. Right on. Right on. How can our listeners connect with you online? My LinkedIn. I'm Jenna Hasenkampf. Okay. I don't think there's too many of us out there. Okay. But yeah, I like myself. Yeah. It's more Matt Fraser's than you can shake a stick at. But anyway, that's awesome. So LinkedIn, are you active on Twitter? I am not. I finally deleted my Twitter. Elon and Trump drove me out of there. I was just like, all right, I'm good. Fair enough. I'm good. Yeah, no, LinkedIn's great. So on LinkedIn as well as the website, it's the agency website is MK. Sorry, I'm going to it. mkgmarketinginc.com. Yeah. And you'll find her profile on there as well. Hey, I want to thank you. I want to thank you very much for being on the show. It's a pleasure having you. Hope to have you again back if we can talk about some other subjects. That'd be awesome. It's been a lot of fun. Yeah, this is great. Thank you, Matt. Right on. Thanks for listening, everyone. You have a great day.